Wizard of Oz. Is this the most important film of all time?
That is a great way to phrase that question. And to that, I'd probably say yes.
Ooh.
I would probably say yes to the level of importance, its meaning and weight to cinema, its history, and what maybe propelled it forward and even to the place we are now. Like, I think without, this is certainly a foundation piece, a very critical foundation piece to all of cinema. I think you have to give it that credit. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, I know so. I see the Library of Congress refers to it as almost certainly the most seen film of all time, the most viewed film of all time. And then there's a ton of other reasons, which we will get into here on the Bluff Council, why this film has been so transformational and inspiring and oft imitated and homaged and respected. So let's get into it, shall we?
Welcome.
All right, Keith. So The Wizard of Oz. We mentioned perhaps the most important film of all time. Let's. There's a lot to talk about here.
There's a lot. There is. There really is.
What's your history? How familiar were you with this film? There was a little part of me this morning as we were preparing for this. I was like, what if Keith has never seen this movie?
He's never seen this.
I was like, but there's no way. There's no way. But there's.
I assume you think that about every movie that wasn't made by the Farrelly brothers. Like that's like, what if he hasn't seen it? No, of course I've seen this. Oh, I shouldn't say of course. Yes, I have seen this film. I saw it as a young child, and I've seen it a few times, over my now 41 years of existence. So yeah, I'm very familiar, but I haven't seen the film recently. This might have been, 10, 15 years. Like it's been a while since I've sat down and watched this movie start to finish.
Yeah.
What about you? When was the last time you saw it?
You know, I'll try not to spend too much time on this subject, but I was really amazed sitting down and watching it all the way through because doing that made me realize how long it had been, even though I've seen it a lot over the years because I've done the dark side of the rainbow. I've done the Pink Floyd Wizard of Oz lineup thing more times than I can count, and that's probably the last 20 times I've seen this movie was with Dark Side of the Moon playing underneath of it, which is a fantastic thing. Obviously, you guys probably know all about it.
I don't. Do you, like, I know of it. I've never done it.
Yeah.
Do you play it with the audio or do you replace the audio?
You replace the audio. And the Pink Floyd, who my favorite band of all time, and everybody associated with them, claims that it's total rubbish and BS, that's not a real thing. It's, who knows? I choose to believe it is real because it makes it more fun, and really it's remarkable. It is a remarkable way that the music, which is maybe the best rock and roll album of all time, lines up with the first, hour of this film. It's really, like, I know not everybody partakes, but if you ever did, that's the time.
Hijo de la chingada. Is that a joint, man?
And you will be impressed. So it was really weird to me to be like, oh yeah, there's audio in this movie. As I was watching, it's like, oh yeah, they talk to each other. There's dialogue. So it was a revisiting, but I saw it dozens and dozens of times throughout my childhood. And the thing that I think is perhaps most interesting, which I wanted to ask you about up front, was because as we've repeatedly referenced, perhaps the most important, perhaps the most influential film of all time. It's such a part of, like, our very fabric. Like, this film to me has transcended just being like a famous movie or a famous piece of art. Like, it's just such a presence. It's such a reality. It's just a part of us. It's like, it's as much a historic event as any real historic event. It's just like, oh yeah, that's just a thing that is a part of life, is the Wizard of Oz. Like, is it even possible to separate that weight and that profundity from this conversation and be able to just like watch it as a film and critique it as a film, because I really struggled with that personally.
I wonder, and I would love to hear in the comments if younger generations are watching this episode. I feel that way, as you described very well. But do people younger than us, do people who are 15 years younger than us, or 20s and 30s, do they feel that way too, or does it have I mean, the movie's almost 100 years old, for Christ's sake, today. So obviously it's lasted, it has its staying power. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying, does it have a cutoff? What are the young people? So you're tapped in with the young people.
Yeah. If there's one thing I know, it's what 20-year-olds think is really cool and how they perceive the world. No, I don't know. I think it's I'm speculating. I think it's not quite as profound as it's been, just because of the nature of the way we consume media now. And it's an hour and 45 minutes. What youngster is sitting still for an hour and 45?
Yeah, I mean, I guess they're not watching the movie, that I can be confident in saying. But I guess like the same way that people probably today say milk was a bad choice.
Milk was a bad choice.
And might not know where that came from at this point. Mm-hmm. That kind of like it just is. It's etched in our brains. You hum over the rainbow. You didn't know that's where it came from. You say certain lines or certain things. Oh, my pretty, ha ha ha. Like you dress up as a witch for Halloween, but just not knowing where the origins of that came from. But it's still part of the lexicon, or like just the part of everyday life in some capacity.
Yeah, I don't know. I wondered that too, if just like people out there watching who have young children or are young adults themselves that can talk about if in the last 10, 20 years, are people still introducing their children to this film at a young age? Are you showing this to your 3-year-old before you're showing them, a modern Pixar film or whatever?
Paw Patrol?
Yeah, exactly. I'm curious about that, and it's fascinating the impact that this film has had. And then I was thinking, as I was reading about all of the chaos and the horror, like behind the scenes, like of this film, that it became such a cultural like mainstay, the most influential movie of all time, maybe, is crazy. Like no one, like who could have predicted that when you take any one of the isolated incidents that you can read about of this movie, that the bad things that happened, like you'd be like, that would shut down a production today. And this one, every day there was someone dying or being poisoned or getting beat up or accosted, and like people dropping out and directors leaving, and just like, oh, classic, best film ever. Yeah. Like, it's wild that it turned out this way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've talked probably for too long without really getting into it. Where do you want to start? Do you want to start with the chaos and the production, because that's obviously a whole thing? Or do you want to talk about the film?
Let's talk about the film first.
Okay.
Why do you think people love it so much?
I think because it's been passed on. I think it's a generational thing that people have shared with their families for generations to come. I think that's why people have grown to love it so much. It's kind of what you were saying earlier about, it's just like, as time passed, it's dug its roots in deeper as people have sort of talked about it, passed this on year after year after year, generation after generation. And I think it starts with how big of a deal it was when it came out. And I think the thing comes to me is like, this is kind of like Avatar.
You're not in Kansas anymore.
At that time. Like it's a thing you had to experience. That's how I remember Avatar being sort of advertised. And maybe it's a bad analogy, but that's what I remember about it. The first thing is like, you have to see this. You have to experience it. You're going to be transported in a way that you haven't been transported before. And I think that's what this film did so well at that time, as someone who was obviously not part of that time. But that's what I think. So it starts at that high of a level of like, holy shit, did you see this? Did you see this? And then from there, it's like, I got to tell someone else. I got to tell someone. And then just people fall in love with it over and over and over again.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's interesting because I think there is the element of it was such a spectacle in so many ways, something that a lot of people had never seen before. But then this opens up the other door, which we can come back to. But just like it made me really dive into the world, the history of like home video and home media consumption, because it's just like it's something you always know, but at least for me, I never really just thought about. Like, this film was released in 1939, and then it's successful. It didn't blow the doors off. It kind of just barely better than broke even, ended up like losing a little money in the initial. But then...
Well, because it was like a $2 million budget?
Yeah, like
at that time,
2.7. It was the most expensive film up to that point. But then it just goes away, because that was how things worked. Like, then it's just like, if you didn't see it, you didn't see it, And then it was re-released in 49 to theaters, and then it started to make some money. And then it was re-released in, I think, 54 or 55, and then it started to make some money. And it wasn't until 55 or 56 that it started being played on television as like a television special, and then it became such a thing. And then it got annual showings every year, and it became like this tradition, because of the way television used to be, there was only a few channels, and you knew once a year The Wizard of Oz was going to be on, and the ratings blew the doors off. And so it's just really fascinating to me that a film like this can come out, be so important in its immediate future, but then it's just kind of gone. And if you didn't see it, you didn't see it, and then it has to continue to like sporadically come back and then start to build on itself. But it really took like 20 years for this movie to start to become this iconic thing. And then throughout the 60s and the 70s, it played every year on television. And that's what kind of helped make it this thing. And it's just really fascinating to me to think about that this time before really the late 70s, 1980, that you see a movie once or twice, and that was like you had to go to the theater to see it, otherwise you were never going to see it again. It's a very finite experience,
So is that are you saying that as a positive or as a negative or as an observation?
More of just like an observation, I think, like as it pertains to the film. I think it goes to show the film's power, that it's more of a positive thing, that you can make this movie that in the initial, like I said, the immediate future is impactful, and people go to see it, and it's all the buzz, nominated for Best Picture, wins Best Song, etc. But then like to come back 20 years almost after it's made, and because imagine a movie that comes out 20 years ago that no one's seen since, and is now released, and now it's gonna take over the world. Like that's really special. That's something that to me speaks to its creativity, its quality, and also the nature of it being ahead of its time. Where now you're in the late 50s and you're seeing this movie on TV for the first time. I mean, 20 years is a long time. That's a whole new half generation of people that are like, oh, this movie's awesome. You know what I mean? Like that's really cool.
Yeah. Or it's just like Suits. It's kind of just like
the
Suits on
modern-day
Netflix.
Wizard of Oz.
It's a modern day Suits is what we're really dealing with here, I think.
Congratulations, Suits. Second most influential production of all time.
Yep. It's everyone's 1 and 2.
It led to royalty, so it's not that crazy.
What you're talking about is exactly what happened to It's a Wonderful Life, only I kind of view it as a negative, the Wonderful Life situation, because Wonderful Life was so much of a dud. Have you heard this before?
I am familiar with that, and I support it because I don't like It's a Wonderful Life. So,
yeah, but it's this
opinion.
Christmas. I guess my point is it's this Christmas institution.
Yeah.
And the only reason it is because it was free.
Yeah.
And TV stations picked it up because there was no, the copyright had run out or whatever. So
it was valueless.
247, they just pick it up because it's like, hey, free Christmas movie. We got to run something during the holidays. And it ran every year. And then people just said, we see it every year. It is good. And then that's what made it good when it wasn't originally.
Yeah.
So it's a weird, that beginning time frame of media in general is just an interesting one of how things could have a shelf life. Like literally, how could it?
Yeah.
How does this work? How, if you didn't see it that weekend or that month when it was in the theaters, like, did all movies just go away? Are there a ton of movies that we missed that we would have loved even more?
Yeah.
You know, like, where are they? How do
a
we
lot of
not,
films
you know?
lost to history that were never modernized or digitized or whatever you want to say, that, you know, burnt up in a fire or disintegrated over time or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff.
Yeah, so it's just this was, you know, this one made it out. And then I guess it deserves credit for that.
Was there ever a time that you thought, and perhaps you do right now, that this was the first film with color?
I did think that. I had heard that it wasn't, like, before this watch, and I was kind of doing a little bit of research. So I knew it wasn't, but I was like, was it? But for a long time I did. I thought it was the first.
That was like, there's like legends like that about this film, which just sort of become part of like the general half awareness of things like this, where you're like, because I thought that too forever. Until, I don't know, it's kind of like you, like, oh, I heard that was wrong in years past, but
Recently,
for most of my life, I was like, oh yeah. And so people went to the theater and they had no idea. Like, you start to over-romanticize this, and then they were just blown away when she steps out into Oz and it's color, and people were freaking out and all this stuff. It's fun to imagine those things.
But it was, I didn't see like a defined answer. Like, is it just because it was like the best use of it? Like, it was still new at the time, obviously, and it was just like, just so well done that people just kind of give it that credit for doing it the best?
It was, I mean, I think it was one of the first several dozen, I want to say, I was reading.
Here is the screen as you now know it in its customary shades of black and white. Here it is, flooded with the rich reality of natural color.
That, like, by 1938, there was maybe 25 or 30 films that had come before it that had kind of popularized it, but people were still kind of uncertain about it. You know, like, people complained about color in movie theaters, where they're like, it makes my head hurt, you know? Like, this is so stupid. But it was, I think, because it was used so profoundly and able to contrast, and also they did so well, like Technicolor, doing all that stuff was really, you know, that process was very arduous, and they really put a lot of focus on it in this film. And I think because Oz also is such like an imaginative, like creative piece of set and production design, that it was really just like, oh my gosh, this is really blowing our minds. This color is crazy, you know?
Yeah. It does a nice job.
So, back to something we were kind of touched on there. Are you able to separate the grandiosity of this film and its importance and everything from viewing it and trying to be, you know, unbiased?
I think I am. I think I am. I think I was. I think I am. To me, there's one, I don't know if you want to get into it, but to me, there's one kind of glaring issue, you know, like one element of filmmaking that I think I go, I don't know, but I can still see the value as a whole.
Are you talking about like a technical thing or a story thing?
The latter.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah.
It's not just a thing.
The thing?
It's the whole thing. It's the script. I think the script is bad. I think the script is bad.
You think the script is bad?
I'm so sorry.
Here we go.
Everyone
Everybody's
has turned this
tuning
off.
out. Maybe we got 15 minutes of viewership now that Keith's insulting.
Hey, it'd be good numbers. I'll take 15 minutes, but
that's pretty good.
But stick around we don't have to get into the negative stuff now. And just because I don't like one part of a whole thing, like, I still recognize that it's, as I said before, maybe the most influential film of all time.
Sure. Don't patronize them. They're adults.
Please.
They can handle it.
Can they? I don't know. Have you seen our comments?
Like with the script, like the dialogue or the story or everything?
No, I don't want to just like pigeonhole it to the story, because the story is in some regards great. The fantastical nature of it. It was the creativity that went into it. Like, it's a lot of it, that stuff is great, but sort of the cause and effect of things. Like,
sure.
It's very like don't ask a lot about what's happening. Like, just go with it.
Don't think anything.
Don't
deeper.
think about it. Don't like just be here and experience it. It's more of an experience than anything. It's like one of the first Marvel movies. Like it's just go and have a good time. It's the greatest, play ever made. It's just like, wow, that's fun and exciting and exhilarating and something I've never seen before. And what a ride. What a good, fun, emotional ride. But if I wrote down a lot of things if you want to.
Yeah, dive in. For the purists out there, we should mention, obviously, it's based on a book from 1900, L. Frank Baum, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. It was a stage play throughout the early 1900s, a very successful stage play, which led to this production. Go through some of your low points there in terms, but I will just say in general, I agree that it's not, and it's just not that kind of movie, but it's not going to hold up to scrutiny in terms of like why certain things happen. Like you said, cause and effect. This is a very much just like, this is this world and don't ask questions, just enjoy it. Because there is a lot of things where you're like, oh, what? That doesn't make, like, as we talk about in a lot of our other episodes, the rules of a world are important so that you can understand the stakes as a viewer. So I know what's happening and why this is important. This movie doesn't really have any of that.
Yeah. That's why if you had phrased the beginning of that question as when you said like influential or important, if you just said best, I would say no. This is not, to me, anywhere near the best film.
Oh yeah, this movie is terrible. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I don't think that.
But yes, I agree with what you just said. Yeah. You can't think about it too much.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'm nitpicking here. I like some of maybe, but I think generally these things should be thought of.
Yeah.
What's the theme of the film? What's the take? There's a message, right?
Yeah.
There's a clear message. What is the message to you? What's the takeaway thematically from this film?
Well, I think there's several. I think there's layers of it. I think it's kind of simultaneously, there's no place like home. The grass isn't always greener, but it's also what you need is inside of yourself the whole time. I think that's a big part of it as well. And then there's probably at least 4 or 5 others. Like it is thematically dense, I would say, to its credit.
Sure. So I would agree. But in Act 1, is that the lesson she needs to learn? Is that the lesson that Judy Garland needs to learn? No. So to me, that's incorrect. Right? Like, the beginning of the movie starts with her dog.
Yeah,
and her dog's gonna die.
The dog's in danger.
Yeah, the dog's gonna be. I have a letter from the mayor where we gotta kill this dog. So she runs away because of the love of her dog.
They'll be coming back for you in a minute. We've got to get away.
Yeah, not because she's unhappy with her
Unhappy
life.
with being home or ungrateful or not valuing.
Auntie M doesn't understand me.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
So to me, that's a really big, if your ethos of your film is like, we have to appreciate where we come from, the people and the places who make us, who love us, like all that shit. Like, I think it's a great message, awesome.
Yeah.
But you have to tie that into her journey. Like, that's a lesson she needs to learn, right? You can't just like shoehorn that into the end and just say, oh yeah, also.
Yeah,
it's not why she went on this journey.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I actually mentioned that to my wife when we just rewatched it, where I was like, oh, she's not like, and so maybe it could have been solved, quote unquote, by just like having her be more exasperated with her aunt and uncle, and maybe they're a little more callous in their nature with the dog. Like, Dorothy, it's just a dog. You have to grow up sometime, like that kind of thing. But that's not there. They're both... endearing.
They're really empathetic. The dad's like, no, we would never do, or the uncle or whatever.
Yeah.
We would never. And then she's like, maybe. Like, they were very sympathetic to the
Auntie
situation.
M like chews out the witch, like, yeah, you're a piece of...
you're a jerk, or blah, 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 blah. And then you know what I think funny's not the right word, interesting. When I say funny, I often mean interesting.
Yeah.
Is that if the whole thing is a dream, the whole thing is a dream, right? Are we all, everyone's in agreement?
Yeah, I know where you're going.
Yeah, that dog still dies.
Toto's as good as dead.
Yeah, what are we so happy about? Like, that's a horrible ending for her story, because everything that she tried to prevent from happening is still going to happen.
Yeah.
That dog dies in the next day or so because they still have the court order or whatever.
The witch is still alive in real life.
Yeah, she's still alive. She hasn't changed. The witch hasn't learned a lesson in any sort of way.
If anything, she's probably more angry because her house blew away.
Yeah, like, so why are we so happy? Like, we're leaving on a sad note. I feel like she learned a lesson she didn't need to learn, and her dog's gonna die. Like, I don't know what we're doing here.
You're not incorrect. You're not incorrect.
Thank you.
I won't say you're right because I want to be on the correct side of history. But
to me, that was like the biggest. Like, I feel like this script should be better in this regard.
Yeah.
This doesn't seem overly complicated, Well,
and I'll just put forth the notion too. I don't know anything because you may be surprised. I was not there during the writing process, but there were. I mean, the way we're talking about, we referenced the chaos of this film. There were a number of writers, both credited and uncredited, who came through this cycle, turning in different drafts and treatments, including Mankiewicz from Mank fame, the Fincher film from a few years ago, who co-wrote Citizen Kane. Lots of people were involved in this, so I'm sure at different points there was a lot of different versions. I know they were adding and taking away all the way up until the very end of post-production. So it's totally possible. And I know the It Was All a Dream was something that was not in the book and was added to the film because they didn't think audiences would deal with fantasy worlds if they're very literal. So it's just like the film turned out to be so amazing in so many ways, and obviously so incredibly important and influential, but maybe where that chaos is the most noticeable, if you really are looking at it through a magnifying glass, is in those details of like story, cause, and effect. Like, we don't want to turn over that mattress because that's where all the problems found their way to.
Everything else is really high-level stuff. It's still great stuff.
Yeah.
But when I think about it, why does water kill the witch? Why is that a threat to her?
And if it does, why is there a bucket of water just sitting on it?
Why is that in an arm's reach at all times?
Yes.
You talk about in stakes. I mean, that's if this is the smoking gun, this is your silver bullet.
Yeah.
Make me know that she's afraid of water in Act 1, where I can be like, okay.
That's kind of storytelling basics.
Right. So can't be the greatest film of all time.
It's like, did that water just melt her? Okay.
Okay.
I guess that's the thing. I guess that's the thing is a big part of being in Oz as a viewer. Oh, I guess that's a thing. Like, and that's
a thing.
That's like what we're talking about. It's not great.
Yeah. And I really, really just personally didn't like the slippers could take you home the whole time. I just didn't tell you because you wouldn't believe me.
Because I'm a sociopath.
You don't need to be helped any longer. You've always had the power to go back to Kansas.
I have.
Try me. Maybe just try. So you mean to tell me this whole thing could have been avoided very easily if we just communicated a little better? You just mention, just clip your heels. I'll see you later. Well, why'd you tell me to go see Oz? You're the person who told me to go see Oz. You knew the whole time.
Yeah, Glinda has alternative motives. She's trying to get the witches killed. She's trying to take over. Glinda in particular is like the part that stood out most to me in this one. That's just like, Glinda can pop up and help you sometimes, but not. Like, what? Why? Like, I don't really. Glinda can show up and rain asbestos snow down on you when you're in the puppy.
That obviously cures whatever disease that was happening.
Yeah, like there's just like that kind of stuff is silly. And then I guess they put in that line, I'm sure people are screaming at their monitors right now, about like, well, you weren't ready yet because you had to learn these lessons.
Then why didn't you tell her before?
Because she wouldn't have believed me. She had to learn it for herself.
along this journey before you could click your heels together or whatever.
Right, but why did she? My point goes to the first point I made is why does she need to learn those lessons?
Yeah.
What
She's
in her
already a pretty
character
well-rounded
says?
person going in.
Yeah, she seems very sweet, very down to earth, very grateful. Like why would she need to learn any of those lessons?
She should have been a little brat at the beginning.
It would make more sense.
Yeah.
Or gone through a really sort of tough upbringing where aunt and uncle were a little more strict, and she was looking to branch out and looking to try new worlds because she could leave a bad life behind and realize that, it wasn't so bad after all if you think about it. But none of that's there. So
yeah, it is interesting.
So it's a terrible movie.
Just super quickly, since you brought up Toto and how Toto's headed for the incinerator, that poor sweet dog. Great dog acting. As you probably saw in your research, Toto was a female dog.
I did not know that.
Yeah, Toto's a girl named Terry, and made some decent money.
I saw.
Made more money than a majority of the humans that were in that film, which is fantastic.
Which is what we really support.
yeah. And it is funny at the bottom. I'm trying not to use profanity, so I won't write the whole quote. But in my notes, it just says, Toto is still effed. Like in all caps. Like the end of the movie, Toto is not in.
He's still going to die. That dog is still going to die.
Let's talk a little bit about the chaos, Keith. I made just the shortest list of just a few things at the top. Obviously, the makeup, several people's makeup, almost killed, or perhaps eventually led to the death of several people. The original Tin Man had to be let go because he breathed all the aluminum dust from his.
Well, yeah, they use like legit aluminum, right? Or so like a paint, like aluminum particles.
Yeah. Like, this
you can't eat
guy.
that stuff.
And then they got mad at him. They were like, you're
pussy.
being a sissy. Yeah. And then the witch that burnt. Her face caught on fire at one point in one of those scenes. She had to be gone for 3 months. I thought it was fascinating that really all of them had to be on liquid diets because in their makeup they couldn't really eat food and they were all just sweaty messes and had to just be sucking smoothies and soup. Judy Garland had to also be on a liquid diet because the studio is insane, and that poor girl, Judy Garland, is famous. Yeah. However bad anyone's ever had it in Hollywood, Judy Garland's probably had it like 4 times worse. Like she is just, I don't know, from everything I've ever read or seen or heard, like she is the ultimate victim of just the atrocities of show business at just a terrible time where every single person on that production was assaulting, harassing, molesting, insulting her in every conceivable way.
16.
Yeah.
16 years old. Like, just Jesus Christ.
The Munchkins were getting drunk and pinching her and grabbing her and propositioning her. And that's just the Munchkins. It's literally from the Munchkins all the way up to Louis B. Mayer, the studio head. They're all just constantly like, it's hard to, like, I'm really good at separating art from artist and, let's say, art from tragedy that may accompany that art. This was the first time, again, watching this all the way through in a long time, and it's hard to just be like, oh, you know what a nightmare it was for her in every conceivable way, and that she's on every kind of upper and downer at all times, and that they said she was so high off these drugs that the studio was giving her, she would just break into giggling fits. And she manages to give an incredible performance. Let's come back to the performances. But such a great performance. But even as I'm watching, I'm just like, this poor girl is just living through one of the worst periods of her life right now. Like, it's terrible.
Yeah. For what? Like all for, like, it's just, it is tough. I think I was reading something like they were saying the worst thing was the drugs and sort of fat shaming. They called her like chubby little fat girl or something. She's clearly, obviously not. But I think far worse is they said the director like slapped her or punched her like in the face to finish a scene. Yeah. Like hitting like a grown man hitting a 16-year-old girl. Yeah. Like I can't. Like I cannot. That's unforgivable. Like I lost for words of how awful I think that is.
Yeah, she's very, very much just property. The studio property. That's what she was viewed as, which is just crazy and sad. And then just so yeah, we all the dangers, the literal physical dangers, the abuse, the people fainting because they had to have such powerful lights on set all the time.
He's dead.
People passing out, all the writers, the director left, Victor Fleming left part way through to go do Gone with the Wind, which was having its own problems, a film I imagine we're gonna stumble our way into here within the foreseeable future. But so yeah, just ultra chaotic.
Well, what about the thing that always jumps when I think about this film is that I still don't know if it's like confirmed or just like rumored or, you know, like a story that's sort of, I caught a fish this big kind of story at this point. But one of the munchkins hung themselves and it's on camera in the back. I've looked at it, I've studied it like the JFK tapes back and to the left, but like, I don't know. Do you have a thought?
Yeah, I love to believe, speaking of JFK, you know me, I love to believe whatever is the worst possible proposed situation. Yeah, that I think, you know, it's been proven false and it seemed false to me. I think in that instance, you see what you want to see. If you look at that shot, trying to see a person jumping from a tree and swinging, you can see it. And I did when I first saw this, when someone brought that up to me in my teenage years, I watched it, I said, holy man, that's for sure. And then you're like, no, it's a bird stretching its neck and its wing. And you're like, oh yeah, that is absolutely what it is. Well, I want to talk about the performances and I want to talk about the music.
Okay.
What do you want to talk about first?
Well, about performances. I think those are, I think they were excellent. I think two in particular were excellent.
Dorothy?
Correct?
And are you going to say the lion?
No.
You're going to say the witch?
I am.
Yeah, she's great. Margaret Hamilton, I think.
Yeah, that sounds right. I learned her name and then forgot it.
The quintessential witch. The quintessential witch.
Yeah, she is like the witch. She's the thing I remember more than anything else growing up because I was afraid of her.
Yeah.
I think she does a great job embodying evil. You know, like she feels evil to me.
Yeah.
In a strong way. I didn't like it. And my mom used to torture me by doing that laugh. Yeah, she would do it like to scare me because that's the relationship we have.
Turn off all the lights at night and just do that from the other room.
Yeah. She'd hide under my bed, wait for me to gently fall asleep. Yeah, so I thought her performance stands out, like is more memorable to me than Judy Garland's.
Yeah, I think
I'm not saying she necessarily gives a better performance. It's just more memorable.
Oh yeah, especially when you're a kid, that's really gonna stay with you. I would imagine for a lot of people more so than just like the pretty, simple 16-year-old who's just like going about her business. It's those like really harsh differences, those harsh departures from reality that you're like, oh my god. But yeah, I do think Judy Garland does really great, especially knowing all the trials and tribulations that she was going through. I think The Witch does great. I like all of the buddies, like mostly. I've never loved the Tin Man. I'm sorry, I've never loved the Tin Man.
I don't love the lion either. I don't love all of it. Like they're all. It's a little bit too much for me, but I think at the time it's very performative. They're very performative.
And when you're a little kid, you like I like the lion as a little kid. I don't like the lion now, but I like the lion as a little kid, and the Scarecrow was always my favorite.
Why?
Because like process of elimination, like you know, like
what a ringing endorsement. What a just he's the least worst, so I'll take it.
Yeah, no, I mean because I thought he was funny. I liked his physicality. I played the Scarecrow in a high school production of The Wizard of Oz.
There it is. There it is.
In a performance that would get everyone canceled today. It's like, in the words of Robert Downey Jr. in Tropic Thunder.
Never go full retard.
He is the most tolerable. Something I didn't like as a child, okay? And this, so it's not just stuff from today. something I didn't like as a child is that they were all such cowards. And I feel like that kind of cheapens the lion's cowardice. Cheapens, take it or leave
His
it.
arc.
But it's like, you know what I mean? It's like, because like the lion's cowardice would be more impactful if they all weren't total scaredy cats. You know what I mean? Like they all hide and run and are nervous, and eventually a little bit the Scarecrow gets a little brave and starts making plans, and the Tin Man gets a little brave and is knocking down the door with the axe. But like they're just cowering most of the film. And then I feel like because the lion should be the brave one, if he was the scaredest one, and people might say he is the scaredest one, but they're all scared, so it just doesn't land as hard as it should.
Yeah, but I think I don't disagree, but to take the other side of it, they're the plucky underdogs, like they're a ragtag group of, people who shouldn't be heroes thrust upon, an opportunity to become one.
Yeah.
So they're ill prepared for this moment and trying to make the best of it.
Sure. Love this film. It's a classic. It's the most important film ever. Don't be mad at us.
But also, it kind of
but also, take a long look in the mirror.
Can I ask you a question? I want to talk about comedy, and then we can talk about music.
Okay.
How much of a comedy do you think this is?
How much of a comedy?
Yeah, like what in terms of, I always struggle. In the past we've struggled with like intent.
Yeah.
Of comedies that are not like out for me. I go, are they trying to be funny, or am I just finding this funny?
Yeah, I think this movie is largely trying to be funny. I think because of just the nature of time and like how long ago this was, I'm sure there are things that weren't intended to be funny that you today are probably smiling at, like, that's stupid, or like that's funny. I wonder if they meant that to be funny. Like probably some of those things do exist, but largely I think this was meant to be sort of like a to quote the poster, gaiety, glamour, like it's just like a gay, fun, happy time. Like it's
yeah.
So
the scene in particular, like there are some jokes in the movie. That's not necessarily what I'm talking about, but the ding dong, the witch is dead. That whole scene,
mm-hmm.
I was like, if they're playing that scene straight, I go, oh man, this is when they say like only bad witches are ugly, or
mm-hmm.
ugly witches are bad or something. I was like, I don't know, that feels you're attacking people now. But like but then it's so over the top of how cheery they are to how dead this, and they're like positively, absolutely,
yeah.
And we have to make sure she's dead. And there's one shot after they like do that whole bit where they go, she's better be dead. And then they cut to Glinda the Good Witch, who has this big smile.
Yeah, that's a really funny
like,
shot. There's a random cutaway. She's just like,
I laughed so hard. Like she's just like, yep.
Yeah.
I hope she's dead. Like it's like no human reaction would ever be that happy or excited or like gleefully excited.
Yeah, just like she's just
yeah.
vibing.
And
yeah, we laughed too. We both laughed.
So then I started thinking like, well, if that's the whole intent of the scene, to juxtapose like this dark nature of someone dying with how happy and gleeful we are about this, like, is it satirical at that point? Like it felt really, really funny, like really funny.
Yeah.
Through that lens.
No, that's a modern interpretation. That's a modern interpretation. I think that was meant to just be like fun and sweet, and the witch is dead. Hee hee. Kids can think this is funny because the witch is dead. But that cut particularly to Glinda is very, very funny in terms of like if you were doing like a Saturday Night Live sketch now, like you'd put that in to be funny, and
to be funny. Yeah,
that's just like, oh yeah, show the witch real quick because she's happy. It's like that kind of thing.
I almost felt like that they didn't have it. They needed to cover it.
Cover the cut.
It's like what do we got? We got a shot of her smiling. Put it in.
She's stoked. Yeah.
They don't know. Put it in.
Yeah. Hey, give Judy Garland some more pills. She's looking fat. These people aren't caring about the satirical humor.
Yeah, that's what they're covering up. They're just like, eat this. Show a shot of the witch.
Yeah,
the
cut
good
to the
one.
witch.
The good one.
Jesus.
The songs. You wanted to talk about the songs?
Yeah, I think I forget, as someone who hasn't watched it in a long time, particularly with the audio on, again, that's not Dark Side of the Moon, I forget how much music there is, how many songs there are, because this will also be unpopular for folks who love this film unconditionally. There's only a few songs that I think are really great. You know, like Over the Rainbow obviously is just a great, iconic, important song. And then, you know, If I Only Had a Brain, and all of the Munchkin stuff, Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead, and really everything in that whole Munchkin scene. And you know, there's a couple others that you're like, when they come on, you're like, oh yeah, this is cool, I remember this. But there's a lot of singing. and I just like, at a certain point, I was just like, this movie, this kind of goes back to your story critiques. Respectful story critiques.
Very respectful.
Yeah, which was just like, this movie is mostly just these folks on this road trip. It's the first road trip movie, and they're just kind of stopping to sing, like every so often. It's like Crossroads, the Britney Spears film.
I kind of think we should do it. It's on Netflix now. I thought about it.
Oh, my wife just had me watch it for the first time a couple weeks ago. That movie is effing bonkers. We should do it. Because that movie is one of the craziest movies I've ever seen in my life. I couldn't believe it. I was like aghast. Anyways, Crossroads coming soon. Yeah, so I just thought it was, I just thought like, man, there's not really a lot happening in terms of story progression. It's really just like getting from point A to B to C and singing a little bit more. And then being like, oh yeah, the witch is still here, be careful, and then continue.
Yeah, it's more story than music, I think, is what your
it's more music
issue
than
is.
story, you mean?
No, I think it's more, I think your issue is more story than music.
Oh, yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think I think if there was more purpose within the story and then songs followed, you wouldn't have the same critique.
Yeah.
But it's very just kind of like we're walking to you watch them walk to a place.
Yeah.
That's the story. The story is, and they make friends along the way. Like it's not, there's nothing to it.
I will say,
I'm sorry, I love this movie.
We mentioned the production and set design. We should mention it again. The costumes, incredible. I mean, all of the design is amazing, and I think that's a big part of the reason this film stands the test of time. The performances are largely fantastic. The characters are very, very memorable. Much of the music is good. The effects, I think the effects are largely pretty good. I mean, 1939, long time ago. And particularly everything around the tornado. And that cyclone that's spinning in the distance on the horizon, that stuff I was reading about how they did that. It's fascinating. It looks great.
Yeah.
The stuff, the bushes and the doors and everything flying up into the air like that. I remember, I think, being more scared by that as a kid than I was of anything that happened in Oz, because that to me seemed so real. I remember asking my grandma, like, wait, are you telling me we might have to go get in a door in the ground because a tornado might come? And she's like, that won't happen in California. I was like, I don't trust this at all. You know?
To your point, and this is something I feel like you've said on other episodes, it's your biggest complaint or gripe that you have with modern day movies. But to give this movie praise, like, this is what makes movies magical.
Yeah.
Is this figuring out how to do these things is what makes movies so impressive, what makes movie making so impressive.
Yeah.
Like, that's a level of creativity that is under-discussed, I think, as we get more and more into today. It's not even just like telling a great story. It's literally, how are we going to do this?
Yeah.
It's easy to tell a story with two people in a log cabin talking to each other, because those things just generally exist. But to tell a story like this, people have these fantastical ideas. Well, how are we really going to do that? They were able to they were able to do it.
Yeah, they just invent a way. They just invent a way.
You figure out a way. I saw a clip online the other day about how a lot of old cinematography tricks, like they would literally paint glass and stack glass in certain ways and force perspective with your lens choice and your lens compression. Like it's a skill set the cinematographers, like YouTubers don't have today. Like you don't have to even think about how to like craft this literal look. Like wildly impressive to have the knowledge to do that. Like to figure out how to do that kind of stuff. You paint in a castle literally on glass.
Oh yeah,
and then use the right lens and stack it a certain way, force perspective a certain way, and there it is. It looks like a castle. Looks like a castle. We just made one. Like that stuff is amazing, and that's what this film really deserves credit for, showing kind of like, hey, what's possible? Because it's so fantastical and so out there at that time. Like, look at what can be done. So that's
100%.
the best part of this movie.
That's well said, Keith. I think that's a great place to end it. That this film really did transform the way what films could do, and viewed from the creator's perspective and also the audience's perspective. Like, what's possible? This movie made so much possible. And the most important thing you said in there that I heard was that everyone on YouTube, other than us, are complete hacks. Hacks.
Please subscribe. Please subscribe.
Except for you, YouTube creator who's watching this.